It was during the Great Depression when men were out of work and money was so terribly hard to come by, and everybody was doing whatever they could to make a dollar. And my dad and my uncle heard about the government was going to pay to have water reservoirs dug on ranches and paid for it by the yard of dirt that they had to move to make the dam. And they decided if they had a pair of mules, they could get contracts to do that dirt work. Well, my dad knew about this guy that had a pair of bronc mules, never been broke to harness, that he wanted to sell. My dad went down there and talked to him and finally wound up buying them for $5. And he managed to drive them home. They were just wild as a box of snakes, and they'd stay a quarter mile ahead of him. But he finally got them up there and on the ranch and let them stay there 2 or 3 days until they kind of calmed down. The only time they'd come in would be to drink water there at the windmill, and they could close the gate behind them and have them in the corral. Well, they got out there, and my dad had broke horses all of his life. And he was a pretty good cowboy and thought he knew what horses were, but he didn't know what mules were. They were nothing like horses except in looks. And they started in trying to harness them. And those mules would kick and buck and bite and everything else, and the only way they could get them harnessed is to rope them and get them down on the ground and harness them laying on the ground. And then they let them up one at a time and got them tied to a snubbing post in the middle of the corral. Well, this had been going on about 2 or 3 weeks, and they finally had both of them harnessed and standing side by side there in the middle of the corral with their noses tied to the snubbing post. Well, my cousin and I, who were about 6 or 7 years old, while that was going on, we were around in the feed yard barn, where an old mother cat had some little kittens, and they were about half grown, and they were just as wild as those mules. Well, we managed to catch one of those kittens, and we found a woman's hose there. It's a kind of a knit stocking or knit hose, but the harder you pulled on it, the longer it stretched. So we dropped that cat head first down in that sock, in that hose, and cut little holes for his feet to stick through and one for his nose so he could breathe, and wadded up newspaper and put it in behind him. And we had a black snake about 4 feet long, and we were really tormenting that cat when he got away. And out the door he went and around the barn and right under those mules, and they just went completely crazy. They bucked and brayed and kicked and stomped, and finally both of them broke out of the harness, jumped over the corral fence, and they were gone. Well, my dad and uncle went out there and they was looking at that mess and found out what we had done, and my dad picked up a piece of harness and whipped their butts on it. But that was always known as the day that the mules went crazy.